can't believe you do this.
The night shimmered with excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars above the grand ballroom, scattering light across polished marble floors. A live jazz band played softly near the stage, their music blending with the low hum of expensive conversations. Men in tailored suits and women draped in silk and diamonds filled the hall, laughter floating through the air as cameras flashed without pause. This was not just a party, it was a declaration of success. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Neon lights reflected off glass towers, and luxury cars lined the entrance, engines purring like well-trained beasts. Inside, champagne flowed freely as executives shook hands, media reporters whispered into microphones, and photographers hunted for faces worth tomorrow's headlines. Then the doors opened again. Every head turned. He walked in with a confident stride, shoulders back, chin high, as if the entire building had been constructed just for his entrance. The husband smiled broadly, soaking in the attention. His arm rested possessively around the waist of his girlfriend, a woman dressed in a bold red gown that clung to her figure, her jewelry sparkling louder than her laughter. She leaned into him proudly, already enjoying the stares. If you love dramatic stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. That's him, someone murmured near the press line. The rising star, another voice replied. Power looks good on him. He heard it all. And he loved it. Make sure they get my good side, he said casually to a photographer, flashing a practiced smile. The girlfriend laughed, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket. Relax, she teased. Tonight, you own this place. He chuckled. I always do. Executives stepped forward to greet him, hands extended, words heavy with praise. He nodded at them as if granting favors, not returning respect. To him, this night was proof that he had made it, that he was above ordinary people, above weakness, above the past. Music swelled. Glasses clinked. The illusion of power wrapped around him like a tailored coat. But somewhere near the entrance, unnoticed and unannounced, another presence crossed the threshold. She paused just inside the doors. Like this video if you're excited to see what happens next, and share it with your friends. While the crowd chased glamour and noise, she stood quietly, her gaze moving across the room with calm observation. Her dress was elegant but simple, her posture composed. No cameras rushed toward her. No one whispered her name. Yet her eyes lingered on the man laughing too loudly in the center of the hall, the man who believed this night belonged to him. A faint, knowing breath escaped her lips. The celebration continued, unaware that the balance of power had already begun to shift. The music inside the ballroom swelled as another round of applause erupted near the stage. Waiters in white gloves moved gracefully between guests, balancing trays of sparkling drinks. Laughter echoed beneath the golden chandeliers, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with fresh roses arranged along the marble staircase. And then, without announcement, she walked in. She did not arrive with flashing cameras or dramatic heels clicking for attention. Her steps were soft, measured. She wore a simple champagne-colored dress, modest, elegant, flowing just enough to whisper sophistication without demanding notice. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup light, her expression calm. For a moment, she paused near the entrance. The city lights beyond the glass walls shimmered behind her like distant stars, but inside, no one turned. Conversations continued. Glasses clinked. A group of influencers laughed loudly near the photo backdrop. She blended into the background as naturally as a shadow at sunset, invisible. Her eyes scanned the room until they found him. He stood near the center, holding a champagne flute, his other arm wrapped confidently around his girlfriend's waist. The red gown, the diamonds, the exaggerated laughter, it was a performance. And he was enjoying every second of it. Then he saw her, the smile on his face tightened. For a brief second, something like irritation flickered across his eyes. He leaned closer to his girlfriend and muttered, "What is she doing here?" The girlfriend followed his gaze. Her perfectly shaped eyebrow lifted slightly. "That's your wife?" she asked softly, though her tone carried sharp amusement. He straightened his jacket. Unfortunately. The wife began walking slowly along the edge of the hall, staying near the walls, as if careful not to disturb anyone's illusion. A few guests glanced at her briefly, mistaking her for staff or a distant relative. No one offered a greeting. She stopped near a pillar wrapped in white orchids. From there, she could see him clearly. Their eyes met across the room. There was no anger in her expression. No pleading. Only quiet awareness. He felt it, that silent gaze, and it unsettled him more than any public scene could have. He quickly looked away, adjusting his cufflinks as if embarrassed by her mere presence. "Ignore her," the girlfriend whispered. "She doesn't belong here." He gave a short, dismissive laugh. She never did. The music continued to play, but beneath its melody, tension tightened like a drawn string. The wife remained still, hands lightly clasped before her, watching as the man who once promised to stand beside her now stood proudly with someone else. And though the room pretended she was invisible, the night had only just begun to notice her. The laughter near the center of the ballroom grew louder as the husband guided his girlfriend toward the bar, deliberately choosing a path that would pass close to where his wife stood. Crystal glasses chimed. The band shifted into a smoother tune. Conversation slowed, not because the music changed, but because tension had quietly entered the room. The girlfriend stopped just a few steps away from the wife, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She looked her up and down, her gaze slow, deliberate, almost theatrical. "Oh," she said sweetly, tilting her head. "I didn't realize this was a family event." A few nearby guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The wife met her eyes calmly. "Good evening." Her voice was soft but steady. The girlfriend let out a small laugh. "You're brave, I'll give you that. Showing up here." She looked around dramatically. "Do you even understand what this night is about?" Before the wife could answer, the husband stepped in, swirling the drink in his hand. "She doesn't," he said flatly. "She never understands anything about business." The words were casual, but sharp. A man standing nearby shifted awkwardly. A woman pretending to check her phone leaned closer to listen. The girlfriend folded her arms. "So tell me," she continued, her smile widening, "did you come to congratulate him, or to remind him of his past?" The wife's fingers tightened slightly around her clutch, but her expression did not change. "I came because I was invited." The husband scoffed. "Invited? Please. You only come to places like this because of me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal, but loud enough for others to hear. "You should be grateful you're even allowed in this room," he said. "Without me, you'd still be nobody. You depend on me for everything." A ripple of murmurs passed through the small circle forming around them. The girlfriend leaned against him possessively. "Honestly," she added, "I don't know how you survived all these years being such a burden." The word hung in the air like smoke. Burden. The wife inhaled slowly. The band continued playing, but now the music felt distant, almost irrelevant. Even the city lights beyond the windows seemed to dim against the cruelty unfolding under gold chandeliers. The husband's voice hardened. "You're a loser," he said bluntly. "You don't belong in rooms like this. Stop embarrassing yourself." For a brief moment, silence wrapped around them. The wife lifted her chin slightly. Her eyes, calm and unreadable, moved from the girlfriend's smirk to her husband's arrogant stare. And though the humiliation burned quietly in her chest, her voice remained composed. "Are you finished?" she asked softly. The question unsettled him. Because in her tone, there was no shame. Only something else. Something waiting. The air shifted. It was subtle at first, a tightening in the silence after her calm question. The music from the live band continued for 2 uncertain seconds, then faltered as the musicians sensed the tension spreading across the ballroom like a crack in glass. "Are you finished?" she had asked. The husband's jaw clenched. The calm in her voice felt like defiance. And defiance, in front of his girlfriend, in front of investors, in front of cameras, was something his pride could not tolerate. "What did you say?" he demanded, stepping closer. "I asked," she repeated softly, her eyes steady, "are you finished humiliating me?" A faint gasp escaped someone in the crowd. The girlfriend tightened her grip on his arm. "She's challenging you," she whispered, her tone dripping with provocation. "In front of everyone." That was all it took. His hand moved before thought could catch up. The sharp sound of the slap cracked through the ballroom, louder than the music, louder than the murmurs, louder than the illusion of sophistication that had filled the night. For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. Champagne glasses stopped midair. A reporter slowly lowered her camera. Even the city lights beyond the tall glass windows seemed to flicker in stunned silence. The wife's head turned slightly from the force. A faint red mark bloomed across her cheek. No one breathed. He stood there, chest rising heavily, his hands still suspended in the air as if he had proven something. "You needed to learn your place," he said coldly. "Don't ever speak to me like that." The girlfriend watched, wide-eyed at first, then slowly smiling, mistaking cruelty for dominance. But the wife. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not hold her cheek dramatically or beg for dignity. Instead, she remained exactly where she stood. Slowly, very slowly, she lifted her head. Her hair fell back into place. Her eyes, calm and steady, met his again. There was no fear in them. And that frightened him more than tears ever could. Around them, whispers began to spread like wine through dry leaves. Did he just? In public? This is too much. The power he thought he displayed now felt unstable, trembling beneath unseen weight. She inhaled gently, as though steadying herself not from pain, but from decision. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. But every single person in the room heard it. "You're right," she said softly. "It's time everyone learns their place." And with that, the night began to change. The echo of the slap still lingered in the air, invisible but heavy, like humidity before a tropical downpour. Conversations had not fully returned. The jazz band stood uncertain, their instruments resting awkwardly in their hands. Even the chandeliers above seemed dimmer, as though the room itself disapproved. She touched her cheek gently, not to cradle the pain, but to steady the moment. Then, to everyone's confusion, she bowed her head slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was composed, almost graceful. Not broken. Not trembling. The husband blinked, surprised by the response. Around them, a few guests exhaled in relief, mistaking her words for surrender. "Yes," he replied sharply, adjusting his cufflinks as if restoring order. "You should be." The girlfriend let out a satisfied laugh, crossing her arms. "See? That wasn't so hard." But the wife lifted her eyes again, and something in them did not match the apology. "I'm sorry," she continued calmly, "that I allowed this to continue for so long." The husband frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her small clutch purse and pulled out her phone. The screen glowed softly against the gold-lit ballroom. With steady fingers, she typed a brief message. Just 3 words. Then she pressed send. Across the hall, near the private executive entrance, a man in a dark suit glanced down at his vibrating phone. His expression shifted. He straightened immediately. Back at the center of the room, the husband laughed, mistaking her silence for helplessness. "What are you doing?" he mocked. "Calling someone to rescue you?" The girlfriend smirked. "Maybe she's ordering a ride home." A few guests forced awkward chuckles. The wife slipped the phone back into her purse. "No," she said gently. "I'm simply informing the right people that it's time." "Time for what?" he snapped. She tilted her head slightly, the faint mark on her cheek now a symbol, not of weakness, but of evidence. "For the truth," she answered. He shook his head, dismissive. You've always loved drama. But this is business. You wouldn't understand. The music resumed hesitantly in the background, though it no longer carried celebration. It sounded like a soundtrack to something unfolding. Near the entrance, movement began, subtle at first. Executives whispering. A shift in posture. A change in attention. The husband didn't notice. He was too busy laughing at the woman he believed had nothing. But the storm had already received its signal. And it was walking toward him. A subtle shift moved through the ballroom like wind before rainfall. Near the private executive entrance, several senior board members began walking forward together. Their polished shoes tapped rhythmically against the marble floor, their expressions no longer casual, but formal. Focused. The murmurs in the room softened. On stage, the event host adjusted his microphone, clearly receiving new instructions through his earpiece. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing through the Golden Hall, "before we continue tonight's celebration, there is someone very important we must properly acknowledge." The husband, still holding his drink, straightened instinctively. A confident smile returned to his face. He squeezed his girlfriend's hand. "Finally," she whispered. "Your big moment." He adjusted his jacket and prepared to step forward. But the host continued. "Tonight marks the official expansion of this company under the vision of its original founder, the true majority shareholder, and the driving force behind its success." A large screen behind the stage flickered to life. Legal documents appeared. Signatures. Registration dates from years ago, long before the husband's name had ever been publicly associated with the company. The husband's smile faltered. "What is this?" he muttered. The host turned slightly toward the crowd. "Please join me in welcoming the real owner of this company, the woman whose quiet leadership built everything you see tonight." A spotlight moved slowly across the room. It did not stop on the husband. It stopped on her. The wife. For a second, the room didn't react. The idea needed time to settle. Then the board members approached her, not cautiously, not curiously, but respectfully. One of them extended a folder. "Ma'am," he said clearly, "the final authorization papers are ready for your signature." Another added, "The international investors are waiting for your confirmation." The silence shattered into stunned whispers. The girlfriend's hand slipped from the husband's arm. "No," he breathed. The wife stepped forward with calm grace, the faint mark on her cheek now illuminated beneath crystal light. She accepted the folder, flipping it open with familiarity. "Thank you," she said softly. The host continued, his voice steady. "For years, she chose to remain behind the scenes. But tonight, it is only right that the world knows who truly built this empire." The husband's glass trembled in his hand. "You're lying," he said hoarsely. "This is my company." She finally turned toward him fully. "No," she replied gently. "It was always mine." Applause began slowly, then grew stronger. Executives nodded toward her with respect. Cameras that once ignored her now flashed relentlessly. And as the illusion of his power crumbled piece by piece, the truth stood tall in simple elegance. But the night was not done with him yet. Because revelation was only the beginning of consequence. The room felt smaller now, though nothing had changed. The chandeliers still gleamed above, and the music played softly, but the energy had shifted. The hushed whispers of the guests floated through the hall like a cold wind, slicing through the arrogance that had once filled the air. The husband's confidence had vanished. His jaw, once set in pride, now trembled. His hands fidgeted with the champagne flute, tipping it slightly so a few drops fell unnoticed onto the marble floor. For the first time that night, he looked small, fragile, exposed. The girlfriend stepped back. Her hand that had once clung to him now rested lightly at her side. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. She glanced around at the executives and guests, seeing their eyes, not with admiration, but with judgment. "Wait, what is happening?" he stammered, voice cracking. This can't." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "He's not the owner," someone whispered. "All this time?" Another voice added, "I can't believe he humiliated her." The wife stood at the front, calm, poised, documents in hand. Her presence radiated authority. Cameras flashed, capturing her dignity and composure, while he remained frozen, a figure of shame. The husband turned to his girlfriend, seeking comfort or alliance. But she had already moved several steps away, her eyes meeting his only briefly before she shook her head and whispered, "I can't. I never knew." The cold reality of his situation sank into him like water filling a sinking ship. His friends' polite nods turned into distant stares. Investors no longer smiled. Even the photographer's cameras now captured his confusion and disbelief instead of his staged charm. Security quietly approached from the side, their footsteps deliberate, breaking the tension like the first strike of a gong. "Sir," one said, voice professional yet firm, "we need to escort you out." He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, former allies now witnesses to his humiliation. He attempted to straighten, to reclaim the posture he once carried effortlessly, but it was gone, crumbling under the truth. As he was led toward the exit, his girlfriend trailing behind with measured distance, he glimpsed the wife one last time. She was serene, her head held high, untouched by the chaos he had caused. Guests whispered, exchanged glances, and some even shook their heads in disbelief. Cameras continued flashing, immortalizing his downfall. And in that moment, amidst the glittering chandeliers and the echoes of polite murmurs, the arrogant man who had once believed he ruled the room discovered a simple truth: power without respect is nothing, and pride without wisdom is its own undoing. Outside, the night air waited like a judge, cool and impartial, ready to remind him that some lessons cannot be avoided. The room was still, but it no longer carried the weight of tension, it hummed with awe. Guests who had whispered moments ago now turned their full attention to her, drawn not by spectacle, but by the quiet authority that radiated from her very presence. The wife stepped forward, each movement deliberate, measured, yet effortlessly elegant. Her champagne-colored dress caught the light of the chandeliers, not as decoration, but as if it were a natural extension of her poise. The faint mark on her cheek, the evidence of the night's humiliation, now seemed like a badge, a silent testament to resilience. She paused at the center of the room. Cameras flashed, but she did not flinch. The murmurs softened into complete silence as she began to speak, her voice calm, resonant, and filled with dignity. "Tonight," she said, glancing briefly toward where the husband had been, now absent, "we celebrate more than a company's opening. We celebrate the courage to stand quietly and work tirelessly, even when recognition is delayed. We celebrate integrity, vision, and the strength to lead without arrogance." The guests nodded, captivated. Even those who had once underestimated her felt the weight of her words. There was no trace of vengeance, no bitterness in her tone. Instead, there was a sense of justice, earned and deliberate. She continued, "I do not seek revenge. I only ask that the truth be seen, that respect be given where it is due. Success built on honesty is stronger than any illusion of power." A slow applause began, polite at first, then growing steadily as the realization of her authority settled over the room. Heads turned in admiration, whispers of respect spread. Investors, executives, even media personnel seemed to reframe their entire perspective of her in that moment. Her eyes swept across the ballroom one last time. The husband's absence did not embolden her, nor did it lessen her presence. She did not need to assert dominance, her calm, her grace, and the undeniable proof of her ownership spoke louder than any shout ever could. Stepping away from the center, she allowed herself a faint, serene smile. Guests continued to look on, a mixture of admiration and awe, as she walked with measured confidence toward the exit. Each step echoed softly on the marble floor, a rhythm of independence, resilience, and triumph. Outside, the city lights glittered like jewels, reflecting in the glass windows. She paused for a moment, took a deep breath of the cool night air, and continued forward. No longer invisible. No longer underestimated. She was respected, empowered, and fully in control of her destiny. And with that, the story of humiliation, pride, and revelation found its quiet, powerful close, leaving behind a lesson that strength is not in arrogance, but in grace.